Hey, this is Sam Black going over my second match with this Twisted Cube draft deck. Let's get it going here. I was on the play, and I had this hand that doesn't do a lot, but I think is an easy keep. I have early interaction, a sweeper to get some card advantage to make up for being pretty mana heavy. Gilded Lotus to cast my big stuff. Celestial Colonnade is a useful card to have when you have a lot of mana. My opponent plays Island and Phantasmal Bear, and my plan is to take a hit from the Phantasmal Bear and get at least 2 creatures with my Rolling Earthquake. My opponent plays Mutavault and Standstill. So this is an interesting spot. My opponent has Mutavault, so I'm going to have to break the Standstill, except I have a lot of mana and I have Colonnade, and long-term Colonnade actually wins the race against Mutavault. So the play that I decided to go with here is to kill the bear in response to the Standstill, and then try to force my opponent to break their own Standstill. So Standstill is down, and now I just start developing my mana. My opponent animates Mutavault, and now, again, I could just Stagger Shock the Mutavault and break the Standstill, and my opponent's down mana, but I don't have a lot going on, and giving my opponent all those extra cards, yes, they go up to 9 cards, but they haven't played a land yet. Play a land down to 8. If they have a 1-drop, which their deck is fairly likely to have, they don't even discard, and then they're just super threat heavy against my relatively threat light hand. So pretty easy choice to just take the 2 here and build up to win the Colonnade versus Mutavault fight. But my opponent plays Fairy Conclave, and now I'm going to be behind in the race, which means I'm not really going to be able to race. But the Conclave can still stabilize against those things, so it's not clear what's going to happen with the Standstill. So I take a hit for 2, and just build up my mana. My opponent plays another good utility land, and hits me for 4. But now I get to play my 5th land, my 6th land, my 5th land to animate Colonnade. And now my opponent can't attack. So I'm stable, but my opponent decides to tap out to go for an attack anyway, which confuses me, but I animate my Colonnade and kill the Mutavault here because it's cheaper to animate, and my opponent has Riptide Lab, which can bounce it, which makes it harder to answer with spells later on. And so now I'm ahead, but I don't really like the way that racing goes here, so I figure I'll just stay back. And now we just hang out. And we're under standstill and no one's making any progress. And I have 6 cards, and my opponent draws up to 8. And breaks their standstill on their turn for a Patron Wizard. So it's a pretty good spot for me. So I'm going to thin my deck here before using the Magma Jet, and then Jet the Wizard. And my opponent has Turnicide to counter it. And so now I decide to not Stagger Shock and wait on Redcap, which in hindsight I think is a mistake. I have so many things to spend my mana on. I think that I should have used my mana that turn. And just gotten the Patron Wizard off the board, and then I have Stagger Shock coming back, so my opponent can't deploy, and I just get to unload my hand and go way ahead. But I didn't. And instead, I play Gilded Lotus here, tap it, and play Red Cap, but my opponent Force of Wills the Red Cap. So now I I play the Lavamancer to stabilize long term. Again, just making value plays. Might have been better to Flame Slash the Wizard and just try to get stable. My opponent hits me with the Wizard. I can't do anything about that. Go to 6. And now I cast Jace. And my opponent left all their mana up, didn't even attack with Colonnade, so it seems like they probably have something. So I figure I'll just pass here and see what they're doing. My opponent sacrifices Patron Wizard to Elder Deep Fiend. Tapping a bunch of my stuff. But I have Fall of the Titans. Which can kill it. And I play around Spell Pierce, but my opponent has Thwart. And now Elder Deep Fiend plus Fairy Conclave is lethal. So I managed to lose from a pretty unlosable spot, I think due to being way too greedy with this Stagger Shock. I just had so many cards on my opponent and my hand cost so much total mana. I really needed to fire off the Stagger Shock when I could do it for free, but I was nonsensically greedy and ended up getting punished in a spot where I really didn't think I could. So, learning moment there. Pretty bad play. Then in the second game, let's just let this play for a second. I choose play, and I think this hand is like sort of questionable because it doesn't do a lot early, but Abbott is an early blocker, and Duretti does fix hands, and Ugin is very powerful, although certainly at its worst against mono blue, just because it's so unlikely to resolve. My opponent plays Cloudfin Raptor, which is fine, then attacks with it to get Ninja of Deep Hours into play. So now I'm really forced to Abbott to block the Ninja, and I get extremely lucky with the Abbott and hit Grimlavamancer, which is obviously outstanding against against a mono blue opponent, and I have Duretti to fuel it, so that's great. But then my opponent Tidebinders it, which I'm not terribly worried about because my deck does just have a lot of spot removal for the Tidebinder, but I do need to find some. Here I just get the Duretti down to try to find some spot removal for this Tidebinder. Discard 2 lands, and my opponent chooses to ignore my Duretti and attack me, and then plays a Vidalcan Mastermind. And I still haven't found removal, so I just use Duretti again to discard 2 lands again. Discard 2 lands. I draw land Emrakul. And I play Soulfire Grandmaster and Talisman. And my opponent Force Wills the Grandmaster, going down to 1 card. So now my opponent has a bunch of threats, and I have some expensive cards, but I have Duretti to try to dig me out of this. My opponent plays Voidmage Prodigy. Now this is horrible for me because these two are both wizards, so my opponent now has 3 counterspells. So despite being empty-handed, I'm very far from resolving anything, and under a pretty fast clock. So here it's looking pretty rough. I only have 2 card types in my graveyard, despite having 7 cards. So I'm nowhere near casting Emrakul and getting that trigger to save me. So I draw a mountain, and I believe I give up on Ugin, because what is it going to do against Void Mage Prodigy and Mountain to try to draw answers? I draw Shelldock Isle and Stagger Shock. So at this point, Stagger Shock will either force an activation of Riptide Lab or get a wizard sacrificed. I'm only at 9, and my opponent has 7 power in play, so I don't have a lot of time to mess around here. So my thinking is that if I Stagger Shock the Void Mage Prodigy, my opponent might sack a different wizard to protect it. Which doesn't make a lot of sense. Because they still won't have enough mana to sack another thing to counter something else. But anyway, my situation's not getting better. So I Stagger Shock, and my opponent just returns the Void Mage Prodigy, which counters the Stagger Shock. And then I play Shelldock Isle, and I don't get very lucky here. Jace, Gilded Lotus, Plains, and Seeker of the Way. I take this Seeker of the Way because I need something that's going to impact the board right away. So my opponent gets Void Mage Prodigy back down. I'm now up to 4 card types because of discarding Ugin and casting a Stagger Shock. So Emrakul costs 9, but I only have 2, 4, 6, 7 mana, so it's not going to be easy to cast Emrakul here, although this is a 5th type. So if I discard Flame Slash to Daretti and draw a land, I can Emrakul. But my opponent can counter the Emrakul. I get to use their turn to pick up... So they probably sack this thing to counter Emrakul. The Vedalken Mastermind. So then I can use Riptide Lab to pick something up to be not... No, then I'm still dead on board. So that looks pretty bad. Whereas Flame Slash is a useful card for getting out of this. So I'm going to plus Daretti and just give up on Emrakul. And I draw Nahiri, so now I can cast 2 removal spells and activate Shelldock Isle. So I lead with Flame Slash on the Void Mage, which my opponent just lets resolve, which I'm surprised by, given that they saved the Void Mage last turn when I used a removal spell on it. And now I cast Nahiri, which resolves, somewhat to my surprise, and use it to kill the Cloudfin Raptor, which can't be saved by Riptide Lab. And now my opponent doesn't have lethal, even if they stop my Seeker of the Way from coming down. So I'm kind of stable. I'm going to attack here, and I'm going to Seeker the Way and block the Tidebinder to free up the Lavamancer. And my opponent uses the Riptide Lab and then replays it to lock the Lavamancer. Excuse me. But now I have this blocker, or, well, so now Seeker can gain life if I can find a spell. And gaining life seems very good. So I could play Colonnade, which is an impactful card, but I decide instead to discard it to Daretti to try to find more immediate business. Find Polluted Delta, which isn't helpful. I could sacrifice Nahiri to kill this thing, but I think it's better to try to find a spell with Nahiri and just to keep it around. And I fail to find a spell, so now I'm actually dead to a removal spell. My opponent plays Patron Wizard and attacks with Tidebinder, which doesn't make any sense to me. I block with Seeker, and those trade, which frees up the Lavamancer. I don't know why that attack happened. I draw a land and discard both of those to Daretti. And now I have Blind Obedience to start gaining life and Divert to counter a potential counterspell at some point. I saved that in 2 counter spells. So I try to kill Patron Wizard, my opponent picks it up. Now my opponent has a tapped creature, so I can Nahiri it. And then I play Blind Obedience. And now it looks like I've turned things around. Certainly turned the corner at the moment. My opponent plays Coralhelm Commander. And doesn't level it up, which is strange because my opponent could make a 3 toughness creature which Lavamancer can't kill, and my opponent can't bounce it with Riptide Lab. So I try to kill it to see what's going on, and my opponent just lets it die. And then I play Shrine of Burning Rage and Extort, tapping incorrectly, but not very relevantly. And I don't want to keep looting at this point because I don't want to deck myself, and I'm happy to just have the counterspell counter here. My opponent plays Stony Brook Banneret and Master of Waves, which doesn't really accomplish much in the face of Shrine of Burning Rage. So I actually make a mistake here. I activate the Shrine of Burning Rage on Master of Waves rather than ultimating Daretti first. This is the first time I've ever played with Daretti, I think. I've certainly never used its ultimate, I just forgot about it. And so I just kill the Master of Waves, and then Lavamancer the Stony Brook Banneret, plus the Nahiri, obviously keeping my cards. I think I mistapped such that I can't cast the Lightning Bolt, but that's okay. My opponent plays Patron Wizard and has no hand now. So I attempt to exile Patron Wizard. This Blind Obedience Nahiri combo is pretty sweet, by the way. My opponent tries to bounce it. I Lavamancer it in response. And then play... notice the mistake that I made with the Daretti, and so now I get an emblem so that next turn I can sack the Talisman to get back Shrine of Burning Rage and then have the Shrine of Burning Rage loop going. And cast Spike Shot and Extort, and now I have tons of different instances of kill all of my opponent's creatures as they come into play. So we'll just watch the rest of this game because it's basically decided. So Daretti swaps the artifacts out, and then I get the other artifact back. And here he just pluses without discarding anything. At this point, I'm low on cards in my library, but I have plenty of damage around, so not very worried about it. I draw Fall of the Titans, which is pretty close to lethal. And just attack. At this point, I'm starting to lag a bit, which means that my clock is actually running down fairly quickly, which isn't going to be a problem for this game, but if I win I do have to play a third game, and time could become a factor at some point at this point, given how long this matchup is going. Ultimate Nahiri. Get Bruna. My opponent makes a Fairy Conclave. And I kill it. But those last few turns after the game was locked up ended up taking me around 3 minutes, just because things were going slow. So I'm down to under 6 minutes for the last game. So here I'm on the draw, of course, and I have this opening hand that doesn't have any red mana, but does have Soulfire Grandmaster to buy time, and Gilded Lotus to eventually get red mana, and creatures that are very good in the matchup. So I decide to keep, and I draw a land that does not get red mana, and play Seeker the Way here, which I think is a mistake. I think I should just play the Soulfire Grandmaster, have a lifelinker around, since I'm not about to be able to prowess the Seeker. My opponent uses Snap to bounce my creature and untap 2 lands, which seems low impact to me. They're now down to 4 cards. And I'm going to play Talisman, and here I think I correctly play Seeker, because next turn I can play land Gilded Lotus and get prowess. And my opponent has Sage's Dousing for my Seeker on the way back down, which explains the snap to some extent. And plays land, and attacks, and a Fairy Conclave specifically, and plays Patron Wizard. So Patron Wizard means that I can't play Gilded Lotus this turn, so I play Blind Obedience and Grim Lavamancer and Extort, but my opponent Force of Wills the Grim Lavamancer. But now my opponent only has 1 card in hand. So my opponent animates the Conclave and attacks with everything to put me down to 9, but also now I don't have to worry about the Patron Wizard making me spend more mana for things. So I can play Gilded Lotus and Extort, and then use the Gilded Lotus to play Soulfire Grandmaster and Extort. But my opponent has Thwart for the Grandmaster. And attacks for over half my life. But now I have a lot of mana and a Spike Shot. So I play the Spike Shot, and I have enough mana to Extort and double activate. I have a little under 4 minutes here. My opponent attacks with both of those things, and I shoot the Patron Wizard, and then things are lagging about like they are now in the actual game, and so I use 20 seconds to kill the Patron Wizard, and then my opponent plays Coralhelm Commander and levels it up to a 3/3, but I was thinking that 2 counters were not enough to make it a 3/3, so I tried to Spike Shot it twice, which is not good. It's actually very bad, because I spend all of my mana trying and failing to kill this thing, and then my opponent can just attack me and kill me. So I lose this game because I try to kill this Coralhelm Commander. The alternative situation is not good. The alternative situation is I play Shrine of Burning Rage and Extort, which costs 3 mana, which leaves me with enough mana to Spike Shot twice and 5 life, which means that I can Spike Shot the Conclave, block the Tidebinder, and go to 1, in theory. if my opponent doesn't have anything. But instead, I take this line that just has no impact on the game and uses all my mana and leaves me dead on board. And obviously, correspondingly die. As it turns out, I did the draw top card thing, and my top card was Fall of Titans, which I actually have enough mana to do for 4, which would have let me kill the Coral Helm and the Tidebinder if my opponent had attacked with the Conclave. And I'd killed that with the Spike Shot, which would force the chump. And so then it's likely that if my opponent didn't have anything, we'd play on from there. And I'd have a Shrine of Burning Rage with 2 going on 3 counters on it, and a Blind Obedience to try to get out of the situation, and it would actually be a game that I might win. But not, I would say, a game I'm favored in, especially given the clock. I would probably just end up timing out, but my poor memory of Coral Helm Commander led me down a line where I was just dead, and I lost.